popular political will to get this done. And I was asked to maybe speak on a sort of broader scale. I think some of the other speakers you hear from are far more technical experts in this issue. I'm just the policy guy, the guy y'all elected to hopefully set a course for our city on things like wages, on housing, on transportation, on a number of issues. But of course, energy and particularly the preservation of our environment and our quality of life is chief among my responsibilities, right? And so we have a situation where I think, by and large, although there are a few folks out in the world, and unfortunately some of them do occupy positions of considerable public influence, we understand that the climate is changing and that we must do something about that. I think that the way that we chose to approach this is a lot like how perhaps a lot of us were raised, that you think globally, but you act locally. And that's where we're at with the Climate Action Plan. The plan has been in the works for quite some time. Mayor Sanders had a plan that was sort of worked upon, was, I think, in many cases, a voluntary approach, a guidelines or a best practices approach. And when I sort of happened into the mayor's office, this was on the list of things that needed attention, needed doing. Along with a long list of other things that we can talk about another night, but this was something that was needed to be moved along. And it was through that process that I was asked to give some policy direction, and we laid out in the State of the City address that I had to legally give. I recognize that an unelected mayor provides the State of the City address seems a bit audacious, but if you look at the city's charter, our constitution, you're required to do it. So there we go. I would share with people that's probably the most honest political speech I ever saw, because I just could say it the way I thought, you know, and I would still be in the council president's office, so I still have some responsibility, but by and large, I can just tell you the way I think it is. And in that speech, I laid out the belief that I believe the city of San Diego has a responsibility to lead on this issue, that we should be global leaders when it comes to tackling climate change, and the primary vehicle from which we'll choose to do that is the Climate Action Plan. Now, maybe I'm wondering, there it is, on their screen. I was just correct one thing Peter said. It is still a draft. It has not been adopted yet. And so your homework tonight is to, if you can read that URL, to download the plan. It's not as daunting as it sounds. It's 74 pages long. This version you see here, the September 2014 version, my office, when I was in the mayor's office, put out a draft version earlier in the springtime. This version has been modified and endorsed by Mayor Faulkner, and I'll tell you that it's roughly about 93% of what I suggested back in the spring. So pretty much it's the same plan. The plan is all-inclusive. We're here to talk about renewable and clean energy, but the plan talks about getting to zero waste. You know, we have a municipal landfill that has a short-term lifespan. We need to do more recycling, keep that thing open, and things of that nature. Climate resiliency, which of course is really important. We know the effects of climate change are happening. Increasingly, the council sees development projects that include provisions for what happens if sea rise happens, et cetera, things of that nature. It talks a lot about transportation. Of course, that's a huge part of the overall greenhouse gas emission reduction. Talking about moving San Diego and Southern California to a transportation network that's more heavily influenced by biking, walking, and public transit. Again, that's in there. There's a lot in the plan, but of course, for our purposes tonight is when it comes to energy efficiency and renewable energy. And the thing that, as I mentioned, from Sanders to the plan that we have today, is that this plan is specific. It has clear and numeric targets with firm deadlines. That has made it somewhat unique in our local region. Other jurisdictions have not quite signed up for that level of specificity, for that level of enforceability. We're choosing to do that based upon, in my opinion, number one, it's the right thing to do, but secondarily, increasing the reports of requiring that. And so better to engage. And that's where you get the target that was mentioned a moment ago, 100% renewable by 2035. Now, how are we going to do that? Of course, that's the discussion for here tonight. I will clearly state very obvious, the obvious, which is that it will be difficult to do. But I think, much like the adage I gave you a moment ago of thinking globally but acting locally, I think we also have that adage which is also 100% accurate, which is that anything worth doing is usually quite difficult, right? Now, as I think about this, and when we were going through our city staff, some of whom are here tonight, and they're really the ones that have worked hard on this plan and really getting the specifics of it. Policy direction is one thing, but really getting to those targets, how do you make it possible? Again, the plan discusses this in some more detail if you want to read it. And 74 is the sort of plan. There's appendices and all kinds of numbers, so for anyone who wants to geek out on that, by all means, knock yourself out. And again, it's your homework tonight because it's a draft plan. So what ultimately is adopted may not be in this format. So your feedback and your thoughts, if the targets are too aggressive, too lax, if we miss something, so on and so forth, now is a wonderful time to provide that feedback. But with regards to the renewable targets, you know, I think of this often in the way I think of a lot of things we're dealing with today. You may have saw about 2 weeks ago, we unveiled new parking meters for San Diego that allow you to pay by a credit card. Now, I would say to you that's about 1990s technology, but it's a far cry from our 1950s technology where you had to go and buy a pack of gum in order to get change to feed the meter, right? We are currently discussing ways to allow you to pay for that parking meter by your telephone, by your cell phone, right? So these are things that were unimaginable just a short while ago. Can you think about having an app that will tell you where every single public parking space is in the city and if it's available or if it is not? This is technology that exists today that we wouldn't even thought of having just a short while ago. Now, I recognize that that is a simplistic approach compared to the actual provision of electricity under all circumstances, under all weather conditions, etc. But I also happen to think that when President Kennedy said that we're going to put someone on the face of the moon in a decade's time, some people probably said, gosh, that sounds impossible. But we got it done. And I think that's the value of the Climate Action Plan. I think already we're seeing commitments from our utility that are either in that direction, as Peter mentioned, being to about a third renewable already, and that's without a mandate, that's without an enforceable policy that really says that's where we want to go. I think that sort of pressure helps allow them or others to really make the commitment to a renewable future. To say, yeah, you know what, I will go into that solar business, yes, I will go into the renewable energy field, because I know the 8th largest city in this country is saying it. And when we do it, my colleagues in places like, say, Long Beach or in other, like Chula Vista or whatever, will follow us as well. So this is the overall campaign that we're on. As was mentioned, this is not unique. This is not a unicorn. It has existed in other communities, albeit perhaps smaller ones. But we do have full countries, as was mentioned. There's a great article, I think, in yesterday's New York Times about Denmark and what they're trying to do along the same path. My point is that people are coming to this realization, and I think rather than simply saying, gosh, that's going to be hard, we have to really owe it to both ourselves and to future generations to say, how will we get there from here? If we're already at a third, yeah, I know another 2/3 is going to be a lift. But I think if you say that if government's willing to say that we're going to put solar on all of our buildings, we're going to work with developers to make sure that new development is wired for renewable. If we start talking about what can we do with public parking facilities, public reservoirs to create the solar fields that are necessary, these are the kinds of things that become possible when the city is on the record wanting to do this. We are creating the political will that presumably when this plan is adopted in substantially this format to really say to the private sector, to the nonprofit sector, to others, that there's a market here and we will work with you to make it so. So that's, I think, over my time at this point, but I'm interested to hear the engagement, certainly talk to people who are far more experts in this field. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I'll leave you with another adage. We started with think globally, act locally, think about anything we're doing is often hard, is that you have to lead us better than you found, right? And I think that we recognize that we have a moral obligation to do so. Increasingly, the young people I interface with, I really kind of believe this as an ethos. I think we all have been raised with that, but this plan is very much a part of that. And if that being said, we're talking about other jurisdictions that do this. If that being said, it's a part of San Diegans, I think one of the things it does is our natural environment, right? Our climate, our weather, our beautiful beaches, our bays, our water, our open spaces. This is what this plan is about. This is why hitting that target is so critical. It's about protecting what distinguishes us as San Diegans. It's about what's doing right for ourselves and for future generations. And it's about preserving our planet, which is pretty critical to the overall operation, right?
Yes.
So that's the broad set of situation that we're in now, and look forward to having more dialogue after the other speakers stop. So Peter, thank you very much.